How does Kansas pull off the upset in Columbia? Players to watch as we further preview the border war between Kansas and Missouri.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode of the show, including our bonus episodes, which we just came out with a little Darren Peterson talk. But we're talking more KU Missouri on today's episode of the show. And thank you again anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe. We're going to get into what are the keys for Kansas pulling off the upset in Columbia. We'll get to our players to watch, both offensively and defensively for Kansas and Missouri. And then we'll finish up with a little FanDuel Friday on today's episode of the show. And hey, what do you know? Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Football season's around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your week 1 NFL bets today with FanDuel. So Kansas takes on Missouri on Saturday. And again, thank you if you already caught our other preview of the game, talking about matchups of the game, Missouri scouting report, and plenty more. I think when you look at this one for KU, you're a touchdown underdog essentially, but that doesn't put you out of reach of feeling like you can't win this game. And you've looked really impressive in the season. We're also still at that point of the year where you still are kind of figuring out what these teams are. Like, you do know that Missouri has some talent, and you do know that KU has looked good in limited action against lesser opponents. It's going to be very interesting how, we view both teams after this performance, and obviously the score and everything will kind of matter into that. But I think when you look at that, like, immediately, if we're just talking about how does KU at least cover, how do they make this a close game? I think the first thing I'm looking at, you have to at least hold up on the line of scrimmage. I'm not saying you got to beat Missouri on the line of scrimmage. They have a very talented defensive line. They have a couple talented pieces on the offensive line, like, big bodies and stuff. It's not necessarily one that is the most cohesive right now. So they're kind of still figuring that out. So maybe it's better you're playing them early in the season, but they still do have talent there. And so again, it's not that you have to win that to keep it close, but the way that you lose this game by more than the spread, the way that you lose by double digits or something, is that you can't block them. Jalon Daniels is getting hit too much. It's causing sacks or turnovers, and they're able to just road grade you on the ground where they don't really have to do much on offense other than handing the ball off to the running back or letting Bo Pribula run around. That is how they just kind of dominate this game and just kind of cover the spread. Like, if you're able to at least hold up there, I feel a lot better about that. The other one is if KU's linebacker injuries don't come back to haunt them. Like, again, this doesn't, Bengali Kamara being injured, KU doesn't have to have the best linebacking game in the world. Kansas doesn't have to, walk away from this game going, oh, wow, the linebacking unit was the best unit on the field today. But can they just hold up? Can they just not, like, you're going to have mistakes. You're going to be playing young guys out there like John Kamara, guys who haven't played like a ton of snaps against Power 4 opponents, whether it's him or Brantley or Vidral, whatever. And so if you can just limit those mistakes, if you can limit the instances where you go, that wasn't great. If it can just be, okay, that was fine. It wasn't the best, but it was fine, where, again, it's not taking over the conversation of the game, then I think that's how you hang in there. Because I do think from a perspective of, you do have more experience at the quarterback position. They're as much as Bo Pribula has looked really good in his limited samples, it's like he's had one game against a Power 4 opponent with double-digit throws. So we don't know for sure on some of these things. Missouri does have some questions on the offensive line. They do have some questions in the secondary where, like, there's enough there that if Kansas can hold up in those two areas, I feel good that it'll at least be a close game in Columbia. Now the flip side of this is Kansas wins the game if what? Well, I think for one, can you, if Kansas is the team that road grades them, right? Like, low-key, Kansas has given up less than 2 yards per carry rushing so far this season. Much different opponent against Missouri than it is against Fresno State or Wagner. But if you're able to keep that up against a Missouri team that wants to run the ball with the quarterback and the running back, then, your defense is going to have a really successful day. And again, like I said, right now they're only giving up 1.6 yards per carry. Kansas actually 5th in the country right now in negative play rate. so far on the defensive side at 18%, which is really good. And they're also limiting explosive rushes. They're top 20 in explosive rush rate defense at this point in time. Now Missouri has a good, running attack, but we know the offensive line, they are not in the top 50 in offensive line run push. So it'll be interesting how that kind of comes together. Now, on the flip side of it, you have the Missouri rushing attack, or the Missouri rushing defense, which gave up 154 rushing yards and 4 yards per carry. Those ranked 93rd and 87th nationally, respectively. And that was against an FCS opponent. So what happens if, I have this worry about, oh no, the Missouri D-line is going to, out-talent this game and it's going to cause KU issues there. What happens if it does end up getting flipped? What happens if Kansas, Daniel Highshaw runs for 90 yards and Jalon Daniels runs for 60 and LaShawn Williams comes in there for 40 yards or whatever? What if Kansas is the team who's able to do that? Then at that point, I think Kansas wins the game, right? I also think that, winning the turnover battle or maybe a big special team swing, like one of those two things would go a long way. The Missouri kicker is out for the season, so maybe that presents an opportunity for you to have there. We'll see what the deal is with Finn Lathan for KU, because I think he's a really good punter, but I don't know the injury status there, and that could be a swing in the game possibly too if you do or don't have him. Will one team return a kick? Will there be, if the turnover battle is even, special teams becomes the way that is almost like, if you do get a big special teams play, it's like you either gained or lost a turnover. So that would be another one that can maybe steal you a game where, let's say you are kind of close to even, but they have the home field advantage. A play like that can kind of steal you the game on the road. Maybe it's a muff punt by them. And, I think back to the at West Virginia game in 2022 where Torrey Loughlin recovers the muff punt, for instance. That would go a long way. And then kind of the last one I would have here for the key for KU, I think Jalon Daniels, if Kansas wants to win this game, Jalon Daniels has to go off. And we've seen Jalon perform well in some big games before. We've also seen him, not have the best game in the world in some of the big games. Like you think of Iowa State game in 2022, that was a struggle. But you also think about the some of the big moments at Texas in 2022. You think about the Liberty Bowl where he was slinging it around the field and leading that comeback against Arkansas, an SEC team. There's moments you could point to everything. Now, when you are talking the signature win of Jalon Daniels' career at Kansas, I think obviously that Texas one would be the one that you would point to, but that was on a 2-win Kansas team. You look at the Oklahoma win that Kansas got, that was with Jason Bean. And I don't say all this to, say like Jalon Daniels has had a good career at Kansas. Like I'm not taking any of that away, but it feels like there needs to be an exclamation point win to it. And there's going to be other opportunities this season for that, right? When you play Utah, when you play Kansas State, but this would certainly be that. And as you look to Jalon Daniels' career, there have been a lot of great moments. There have been a lot of wins, but this would be the biggest of them all, And then beyond that, it's just like, if you want to win one on the road, your starting quarterback has to play really well. You're going to have to do well on third down. You look at the Missouri defense, and they were really good at limiting opponent third downs. In week 1, they only gave up 15%. They were really good at limiting it last year. Well, Jalon Daniels becomes the guy who can kind of be the X factor in that regard. Additionally, if Missouri's defensive line is causing the KU offensive line problems, Kansas is going to have to roll the pocket. Jalon Daniels is going to have to make plays with his legs, not just running the ball, but setting up the pass with his scrambling ability. So I look at Jalon Daniels and I say, if you have one of your, A-tier games, which we've seen him have, and if he has one of those games, I think Kansas can win the game. And that might be what it takes for Kansas to win the game. Kind of as the late Terez Paylor used to say, an over his dead body game. Maybe Jalon Daniels, if he has one of those games, Kansas can pull off this upset on the road. All right, let's get to players to watch, though, and then we'll finish up with FanDuel Friday. This is Locked on Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For the Kansas Jayhawks, to me, I mean, you could point to a lot of guys, but I'm going to say Trey Lathan delivered in a big way against Wagner. Now, He tied for the team lead in tackles, had a couple TFLs, but you have all these linebackers who are getting ejected from the game, who are injured, and he's just been kind of the steadying force for KU as a linebacker. And so it feels like when the pressure is on, Trey Lathan is coming through early in the season, no hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, the performance doesn't seem to be a fluke. Put up big stats at West Virginia, now doing so at Kansas. And just like Trey Lathan delivered for the Jayhawks, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays with DoorDash Streaks. You save every Saturday you order. Stack it up all season, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day. Only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. Today's episode of the show is also brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. They follow what moves them every time they drive, and that's what makes Mazda stand out. They go beyond safety, style, and performance to deliver a driving experience that feels alive in every detail. As an athlete focuses on every detail, Mazda does the same. From metallic accents to hand-stitched Napa leather, you can feel it the moment you get behind the wheel. The smooth handling, intuitive controls, and standard all-wheel drive in every crossover SUV. It's the small details that make the big plays. And just like there's more to every player and every play, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved with Mazda. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page, and you can check out Locked On College Football for your second listen every day as well. Okay, players to watch for Kansas against Missouri. We'll start with the visiting Jayhawks in this one. Offensive side of the ball, Jalon Daniels has to be the first one. We just talked about it. Like, I try to avoid picking the quarterback in these because it's kind of obvious. Like, of course, the most important position in sports maybe is going to have a big impact on the game. But again, I keep going back to the idea that, like, he's going to have to make plays with his feet. He is the leader. He's going on the road looking for a signature win. It's impossible not to pick him. I don't need to reiterate all of that, but yeah, he's one of the guys. The other one is, I guess I would say, Enrique Cruz / Nolan Gorsica. Gorsica played really well against Wagner. We'll see if that means, but so did Cruz. Cruz played well there. We'll see if Cruz takes up all the snaps. We'll see if they continue to rotate and kind of battle through for that right tackle spot for KU. But this is where who wins that battle and who performs is going to matter a lot. Like, it didn't matter maybe as much against Fresno or Wagner. It matters now against Missouri. Missouri has a really strong defensive line, really talented defensive line. Their left defensive end. So if you're on the left side of the defensive end, you're facing off against the right tackle. When you look at how things face off and mirror off, it's Zion Young. Young is a 6'5", 260-pound defensive end. He had 42 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, and 2.5 sacks last season. So really productive player on the D line. And there's so much talent on the Missouri defensive line. But given that this is one of those spots that the KU didn't really have locked down until we started the season, I guess, and technically they're both playing, we'll see for this game, it definitely becomes a key spot on the line for KU. Because if you're able to, one of your spots that was, again, more up in the air, kind of fortify that spot, that speaks well to you being able to do the other spots as well. But especially when you look at the edges and you think of the premier pass rushers coming off the edge, like, this is that opportunity. If Enrique Cruz, you have a big game against Zion Young, you're going to feel great about that right tackle spot being locked down for the rest of the season. On the defensive side of the ball for KU, John Kamara is one. Trey Lathan is kind of your constant at one linebacker spot. Well, John Kamara is going to be the guy. I mean, he was the starter last week before he got ejected early going of the game because of the targeting call. He's back for the full game this game, but with Bengali Kamara out and with Joseph Sipp still out, all of a sudden John Kamara plays a huge role on this team. And he's a freak athlete. He'll be as good of an athlete as either team has on the field, but he's a redshirt freshman. He's probably going to make a couple mistakes, and you're going to have to live with him and hope that he's just flying like a bat out of hell so that he can, make up for some of those mistakes with just being a big hitter and flying around and obviously, trying to do it without getting another targeting call. But he could be kind of an X factor as well, because you look at Missouri being a team who wants to run the quarterback. You think of the linebackers having to mirror that. Well, as great of an athlete as Bo Pribula is, he'll probably be just as fast, if not faster, than a lot of the linebackers he faces. That ain't the case against John Kamara. So I'm going to be very interested to see how he performs. Hopefully stays on the field a little longer there. Mason Ellis is the other one. Kansas kid. He becomes an extension of the linebackers in certain formations, which you want to talk about stopping the run. That becomes important. And if Kansas wants to play a fifth DB, that fifth DB has to be able to come in and stop the run at times. Well, in certain situations, it'll be Saeed Gibbs as more of a nickel corner. In others, it'll be Mason Ellis as kind of that safety, third safety on the field who acts as a box safety or, whatever, sometimes even in the slot. But it becomes not just important against the pass, it does, or against the run, it does become important against the pass. And whether it is Ellis or Gibbs in the specific matchup, Kevin Coleman is the main slot man for Missouri. Really productive player at Mississippi State last year. He had over 900 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns for not a great Bulldogs team. Transfers to Missouri. He played 28 of his 33 offensive snaps in week 1 out of the slot, and he had 6 catches for 48 yards. They're going to target him. KU has to be ready. Some of that's going to be on Mason Ellis, as is some of the stopping the run. And you have the added part that he's a Kansas kid, and I just inherently think that the Kansas kids are going to understand this rivalry just a little bit more against Missouri. And on the Missouri side of things, player to watch on offense, Caden Green. He was a preseason All-American at the guard position, but they wound up kicking him out to left tackle. He had a 75 PFF grade last season as a guard. Week 1, bit more mixed results as a tackle, 67 in run block, but just a 53 in pass block. You put on an island a little bit more, so that's a tough adjustment to have. Can Dean Miller, can Justice Finkley, can Alex Bray take advantage of this guy who, again, you're playing him earlier on in the season where he doesn't have as much experience playing there. Can you take advantage of that, or will Caden Green show why, he's so highly thought of coming into the season? Ahmad Hardy is the other one to watch. Over 1,300 rushing yards, 13 touchdowns as a freshman at UL Monroe last season. Ended up transferring to Missouri, racked up 10 carries, 100 yards, and a score in week 1. So really efficient there. And what was honestly most, I think, impressive about his game, whether it was week 1 or last season, really good, tough to bring down. He's going to keep running after contact. He had over 1,000 yards after contact last season. He averaged over 4 yards per carry after getting contacted. And in that Missouri opener, he averaged 4.5 yards before contact, 5.5 yards after contact per rush. He is honestly legitimately one of the best running backs in the country. So that's going to be tough. And I brought up the stat before. I'll bring it up again. Kansas is 18-4 in the Lance Leipold era, 2-0 this year. When they give up 4.4 yards per carry or less, they are 6-24 in the Lance Leipold era when they give up 4.5 yards per carry or more. On the defensive side of the ball for Missouri, we're going to go with Damon Wilson II. I already touched a little on the talented Missouri defensive line. I talked about Zion Young. Well, the other defensive end is Damon Wilson, who you would assume that battle is going to be against Calvin Clements. And so Wilson is a transfer from Georgia. He was at Georgia for 2 years. Last year, he had 22 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks with the Bulldogs. And in his first game with Missouri, he looked like Missouri's best defensive lineman. He had 2 sacks. He had a 91 PFF grade and a 91 pass rush grade. He could be one of those guys. I mean, you talk about Calvin Clements, who I think very highly of, but this is definitely one of those throw into the fire your second game as the full-time starter. I guess this would be his 3rd or 4th overall game as a starter for KU. This is probably the toughest matchup that Calvin Clements has ever faced since coming in there for KU. So good luck, and if he can hold his own, that would go a long way for KU. And then the other one is Jalen Catalon. Catalon is a former 4-star recruit. You will never guess what class he was in. 2019 was the year he was the 4-star recruit. He's in his 7th year of college football. So I guess you could say he's an experienced player, but he had 3 tackles, 72 PFF grade, 30 snaps in the opener against Central Arkansas. So good player at safety for them. But I think what else is interesting here is Catalon's actually 2-0 against Kansas. He didn't play. I think he was hurt, but he was on that 2022 Arkansas Liberty Bowl team that beat Kansas. And then the more, I guess, prevalent one since he played was last year. He was a member of UNLV, and he had a really good performance. He had 3 tackles. He had an interception against Kansas. He was targeted 4 times in coverage. He gave it just 1 catch for 10 yards. Now, maybe some of that was Jeff Grimes just spamming deep balls, but you're targeted 4 times. You only give up 2.5 yards per target and an interception. That's a really good day. So with all the trickery and motion that KU runs, a lot is on the safeties to kind of read what's in front of them and not get, sucked up to where you're giving up something deep that is a big explosive play that changes the game. So Catalan's going to have a big impact on this one for Missouri. Our player matchups of the game: Connor Tollison, the center for Missouri against the KU defensive tackles. Tollison has over 30 career starts. He's a preseason all-SEC guy at center. Back-to-back seasons over a 74 PFF grade. Really solid player on the interior. And then KU has that strong depth at defensive tackle where it feels like different guys kind of stepped up each and every game. That'll be a fun matchup. On the other side of the field, Emmanuel Henderson against Dalen Carnell. Henderson is coming off his best game as a college player, 130 yards receiving. Missouri's slot guy on defense,6 Carnell. He'll play some as a box safety, as a free safety, as a nickel guy. But he has 3 career touchdowns. He's 8 total turnovers forced on defense. 75.5 PFF grade last year. 82 in coverage. They'll use him everywhere. I'm sure some will be a corner on Henderson, but if that matchup happens, that'll be very interesting for how that kind of comes together. And for KU, if they are getting pressured, they're probably going to look for, the quick screen game, which Henderson becomes more important in that too. All right, let's finish up here with a little FanDuel Friday. This is Locked on Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Upside. And with Upside, if you're going out to the game in Columbia, you're going to be paying for gas. Are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited time promo code FOOTBALL and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year from buying the gas you already needed. You might think it's too good to be true. It's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or any gift card for Amazon or other brands. Don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app now by using limited time promo code FOOTBALL for a limited time 25 cent per gallon bonus. That's promo code FOOTBALL. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL season's almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff. I guess it is here after the Thursday night game, but it really gets started on Sunday, right? I guess with the Chiefs game. But regardless, right now new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. That's a lot that you can use on futures. They sell futures in the season. Like if you're not, deterred by Texas, even though Arch couldn't throw against Ohio State, you can get them at a better price to, win the national title. Or if you really like the way that LSU looked or something, you can get them. You can get Darren Peterson to win National Player of the Year, to win the Wooden Award over at FanDuel. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That is FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. On to FanDuel Friday next. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the show. Again, you can check out Locked on College Football for your second listen every day as well. All right, FanDuel Friday. Quick thoughts on the spread. 6.5 for Kansas. Not really a number I'm touching. It's always scary that it's not covering the 7.5. I will say this, though, and I don't know what the opening line was, whether it was 7.5 or 6.5, and it got bet down one way or another. Regardless, we'll see what it closes at. But, sometimes if they give you 6.5, that can actually be like a good thing because it's Vegas saying, not giving you that key number that they're saying we actually like the Kansas side on this. So I don't know. We'll see where that closes. The over-under is 50.5. Honestly, my inclination, and talked about this on our crossover episode this week, is actually to take the under there. I could see both defensive lines having strong games. If there's some questions at least one or two of the offensive line spots for both teams, maybe that means we end up with an under, rivalry game, players running around, hitting hard. Maybe it's like 24-17, 21 or 20-17, something like that, that could go under. My favorite KU prop bet of the game, I really like Jalon Daniels anytime touchdown at plus 175 at FanDuel. If you just think he's going to be having to run more, KU's going to open up his legs a little bit more. You think about using those legs in the red zone where it can be really helpful. Plus 175, I like that for sure. Also, his over-under for passing yards is 195.5. If this is a game where Kansas gets down or has to keep up with Missouri, all of a sudden, you're in a game where he's going to have to be throwing through the fourth quarter. And especially even if Kansas is up, it's going to be probably a close game that you're going to have to keep throwing. So I like that against a Missouri secondary that, has some talent, but I think does leave something to be desired on occasion. And then the other one here is Bo Pribula, his over 39.5 rushing yards. That feels like one where KU struggled against rushing quarterbacks. At the very least, you look at what he did in week one and he had like a 9% scramble rate, which is really high. He's somebody who will, if the first read isn't there sometimes, he'll just take off and go. I also think it's going to be a big part of Missouri's game plan. They want to run him the football, so I would definitely be taking the over on that one. Favorite KU prop parlay. You can do kind of limited on this. Jalon Daniels, 175 passing yards, plus Bo Pribula, 30 plus rushing yards. You can get Daniel Highshaw's over under at 59.5. Again, they bottom 50 in the country in yards rushing and yards per carry allowed after the first week, and it was against Central Arkansas. Maybe put it together, take a risk on it. It's around plus 300 and roll the dice and say this will be a good KU rushing game. My favorite other bet in college football this week, little teaser parlay. Mississippi State plus 17.5, playing at home against Arizona State. Long way to travel for them. There's already some complaining. It's going to be a hostile environment for Mississippi State, who I do think has a little bit there. I think Arizona State, I don't know, man. I see you playing an FCS team and you're targeting your first-round receiver 17 times in a game. It's like you couldn't do anything else against the FCS team. I think Mississippi State keeps it close. Ohio plus 21.5. Again, these are teasers, so you're adding alternate spreads but putting them together to get more decent odds. Ohio's plus 3.5 for the game. I'm teasing them up to 21.5. But West Virginia plays Pitt next week. Could be a look-ahead opportunity for them. And that one, maybe they even get College Game Day. So there certainly could be looking ahead there. And Ohio's pretty good. Parker Navarro looked really good in the first game of the season. And then the other teaser, I'm pushing Iowa up to 8.5. Feels like all those Iowa State games are always close. Iowa's won a majority of them, but Iowa State's had some recent success recently. But yeah, I'm going to push it up to 8.5. And the combo of those three on the teasers is minus 106 for putting that together. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the show. Check out all of our KU Missouri content and previews from the week, and we'll be back at you to recap whatever happens in Columbia on Saturday afternoon. See you next time with Locked on Jayhawks.